everyone, welcome to our flipped instructional session on Unit 14, Lesson 3, Trade, where we are going to talk about, you guessed it, trade. So let's go ahead and open up our lesson together. Don't forget, as always, I start out opening up those lesson resources. Our objective, we are going to review some things that we've gained, or knowledge that we've gained in previous lessons, and we're going to start conducting research in preparation for a writing research report. So this is a great time to start taking notes and gathering that information. This will be important as we move through Unit 14 towards our last teacher-graded assignment of the semester. And don't forget, while you're in the lesson resources, to open up the student guide. We will use this as we go through the lesson when we are instructed to take a look. So we'll start out with our lesson introduction. In the days of the Egyptian pharaohs, how did ideas move from place to place? How did Islam find its way to England? How did Greek citizens learn about Persian and North African cultures? Trade has played an important role in cultural diffusion. It was trade that spread Byzantine culture to Russia and Islam to Mali. Most people probably didn't realize they had any connection to other regions, but gradually, over time, trade opened their villages to culture and ideas from other places. As early as the 2nd century BC, caravans from China carried goods to Persia along the route known today as the Silk Road. The Silk Road was a network of roads and short sea routes over which traders moved between east and west. It reached its height in the 18th century AD, and in the 16th century, explorers discovered faster and safer ways to transport goods. The Silk Road wasn't the only trade route in the world, but it illustrates the power of trade in spreading ideas. Take a step back in time and travel the Silk Road, and as you journey, identify trade items and the places they came from by completing along the Silk Road. So we're going to focus in on that trade on the Silk Road. We're going to focus in on what items were going where and where were they coming from and where were they going to. So you can go ahead and open up that along the Silk Road activity. And when we open that up, we can see here we have a table to fill in. We're looking at 2nd century BC to 6th century AD, what, from, and to. So what was it, where was it coming from, and where was it going to? We have certain boxes filled out. So ivory, jade, and ceramics. So far we know that it was going to Persia and on to the Mediterranean region. So we want to know where it's coming from. So you're going to fill in each of these boxes as you go through and take a look at different items. You'll also notice that you have a trade document. So we'll take a look at that, see if it helps us to identify where to go. We can also look in our student guide. We see that the first activity is trading along the Silk Road and beyond. And we are going to go back to earlier chapters in our textbook to identify the goods, ideas, and people and other items that traveled along the Silk Road in different time periods. We're going to complete the Along the Silk Road, that's the one with the table, by listing goods or ideas that moved over the route, where they came from, and where they went in each of the time periods shown. There may be an overlap of goods and ideas in different time periods. You don't have to list everything, but it also gives us some suggestions of where to look. So you can start glancing in these chapters to see what is moving where and from where. Okay, so that's just a good idea of where to start. Let's go ahead and open up that trade document. And I think it's going to give us an idea. No, it's just the same. Yep, same information there. All right, so let's do one together so that you guys kind of get an idea of how to complete that activity. So one place I could start is I could start by looking at ivory, jade, or ceramics. That may be a little too general. So Persia and onto the Mediterranean region. I'm going to look and see, where do we talk about Persia in our book? So I go to the index on page 657. And I'm looking for Persia, and I find Persian Empire. And that's probably a good place to start. I see several different selection of page numbers to look for. So you can start with the first one. You can start with, there's some topics here. Conquered, conquest of Babylon, invaded by Muslims. So you can pick which one you think it could be, or just the most amount of information, maybe on, let's see a lot of 300s, 301, 329, 305. So I can just take a few of those pages and I'm going to look and see if I see anything about trade mentioned. And so it'll be kind of like a word hunt here or search and find, and it'll be some trial and error. So when I look at Persian Empire, the first page it mentions is 144, and look, I look on 144 and I see through trade, travel, and warfare, the fruits of civilization slowly spread. This could be a good place to look. But it's about the Persian Empire, so when I look over in the next column and see when it talks about Persian Empire, I see they're talking about some trade, but I don't see anything about specific goods that were moved or ideas that were moved. And I'm looking for ivory, jade, and ceramics. So that may be a good one to note and come back to, but I didn't see it there. And so I may move on to a different one. And so if I go to page 411, let's see what we see there until we find what we're looking for. 411. Remember, it's talking about the Persian Empire here. So I see Persians mentioned. And so I'm going to see what it's talking about. And really, I don't see anything about trade here. So I'm going to move on to the next one. All right, so I looked at all of those pages and I didn't see anything. So now I'm going to brainstorm and think. I'm looking at the Silk Road. And so let's look at the Silk Road in the index. And let's start there and see what we can get from this list. So I go to 175, 176, and then it's also mentioned 572, 587. So I'm going to start on 175, 176. And as I read about the Silk Road, I see a lot of what is being traded on the Silk Road. Setting out on the Silk Road on 175, and then turn over to page 176, and in that second column it says, and it's talking about China, silk was the most prized of Chinese exports. Okay, so they're taking silk from China, but the merchant caravans also carried, so also coming out of China was ivory, jade, and fine quality ceramics. So now I know that ivory, jade, and ceramics were coming from China and going to Persia and on to the Mediterranean region. So I've got that first one done. So continue reading here, see how much you can knock out. If you get stuck on any of those, you can always refer to the lesson answer key, and then I encourage you to go in your book and highlight that. So see if you can complete that activity. And then to finish up this assignment, it tells us to brainstorm some research topics. So your next assignment will be to pick a topic for a research report. Researching the Silk Road and the spread of goods and ideas leads to many fascinating topics. The potential topics suggested on the next screen are all related to the Silk Road. If you're not interested in some aspect of the Silk Road, think about the other people, time periods, or places that you have studied in this course. Your topic must be related to the course. Scan the appropriate sections of your textbook. You can use the encyclopedia. You can use some internet search. Remember some of the key things that we've talked about there, and we'll go over this in the next flipped recording in a little more detail about research that we've talked about. Wikipedia is a starting point, but it's not an academic resource because anybody can add or edit information on that site. So make sure that you're using academic resources. Textbook, the encyclopedia, those are going to be the best places. Remember, we talked about .gov, .edu websites. Those are also academic resources. But the goal of today is just to have a topic in mind. And so as you narrow that down, it's not just going to be generally about the Silk Road, but you can kind of fine tune that down to geography on the route, a city or cities along the Silk Road, people along the route, transportation over time, archaeology, Cyrus, Darius, Alexander the Great. All of these people were tied into the Silk Road in some way. The cons, why the Silk Road declined, silk, spices, any of the goods or ideas or anything moving along the Silk Road. So you see here you have a great list to get started. This is not the only things that you can pick, and so if you have something else, you can do that. So I encourage you to pick something along the Silk Road, but you've got your course that you can pick a topic from. And look for the next flipped recording to go over more details of that assignment. But today, just picking your topic. So you've started your research a little bit, thinking about all the different things that were moving along the Silk Road, and then hopefully now you've picked your topic. But you can look for a flip follow-up session in your Class Connect schedule, attend that session to carry out this topic and others further into practice. You can attend Help Lab for extra support if you have any questions on your history course. Have fun, and I will see you on the flip side.